All right, great, thanks. So thank you for the very detailed introduction, Nanchin. It's a bit flattering, but yeah. So we'll just get into the business of the day. All right. So I'll just quickly go through this slide. Nanchin has done most of the work. Um, so for those of you who hadn't seen my face and maybe your videos aren't working somehow, that's how I look like for most of the times. And those are my professional affiliations here in Zimbabwe. So what brings us here today? What is it about these mysterious birds that we call owls? So I'm pretty sure we would all agree that owls are like the most, like apart from the fact that they're the prettiest birds out there, they're very different to the most of the birds that we know. And this stems from their physical differences, so they even sound different in addition to just their looks. And in the ecological space, we're also cognizant of the unique role that they occupy as apex predators, helping us to deal with pests like rats. And also in different cultures, you would know that owls are recognized as a key species, signifying different things, much of which we'll get into this presentation. And also, I'm pretty sure I can see there's people from Southern Africa and West Africa and also Europe on the call. So I'm pretty sure growing up, you also had interesting stories about these owls and what they mean in your different places. And perhaps we could also talk about that at the end of the presentation. So this study was conducted in Nigeria, and we're lucky enough to be able to get coverage of essentially the whole country. But for comparison's sake, we compared the northern region of Nigeria and the southern region of Nigeria. So these two regions bear with them a vast amount of differences. So the political landscape is very different between the two regions, and also the social and environmental differences as well. So we managed to talk to 1,819 people throughout our survey. And these are the people who are staying in the communities just neighboring the legacy biodiversity areas you can see on the map. So in southern Nigeria, we went to RITA, and we also went to the communities around Water Farm, and we also went to the communities around the Cattle Ranch. And then in northern Nigeria, we went to the communities in Adejagoro wetlands, and also the Gelnyaki Forest Reserve. So we mainly used social tools for this survey. So we deployed questionnaires using covert robots, and then we also did covert observations at traditional medicine markets in 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 the legacy biodiversity areas. And as you can see, they were with some of the community leaders. So this was also part of our standard procedure before entering the community, that would go and announce our presence to the community leaders and seek permission to speak to the local people. So during these interviews, what is it that we actually look for? First of all, we kind of assessed the overall knowledge of owls in the community. So I wanted to see that before we ask people really deep ecological information about these birds, do they know what kind of birds we're looking at? Do they know what they sound like? Given that these are nocturnal birds, so maybe most people won't see them, but they probably hear them more than they see them. And then we're also looking at the frequency of encounter. So how often do they see these birds? How often do they hear them? This being an indicator to the current population levels of these species. And then in terms of the trade, we're actually interested in the factors influencing the whole body part trade. So what were the motivations? What were the drivers for people to seek out these whole body parts? And then we also looked at the specific uses for the different parts in the different in northern and southern Nigeria. And then we also compared the prices at the time. So this was the demography for our respondents. Majority of our respondents were males, as you can see, particularly in the in the difference is particularly apparent in the northern region because of the cultural setup there, where women are typically excluded from like large gatherings with unknown people. They're typically kept in the house or compound. So that affected the number of women that we spoke to in the northern region. And then in terms of the age class, majority of our respondents were between 31 to 50. That is also across both the regions. And just the second largest was the second 16 to 30 age group. And then in terms of education, majority of our respondents had reached the maximum of secondary education. And in the northern region, we also noticed that the amount of education that the people get there is particularly low, with most people um, opting for Islamic education as an option, which wasn't present at all in the South. And then in terms of income, just for context sake, at the time of the study, $1 was about 1,000 um, naira, 1,000 Nigerian naira. So majority of our respondents at the time reported earning between 15,000 to 30,000 Nigerian naira per month. So that would be like 15 to 30 US dollars. In terms of the data that we got, the responses that we got, all our data was analyzed using a chi-square test, comparing the differences between the responses we got from the northern and the southern region. So in terms of the raw knowledge, we discovered that northerners actually know more about ours, as compared to southerners. The reason for this, we deducted it to the fact that in northern Nigeria, the lifestyle is primarily based, and there's a lot of farming happening in the region that we went to particularly. So, as we would know that farmers don't like rats per se, so they're quite aware of everything that helps them deal with threats since it's ours. Yeah, so northerners tended to recognize more calls of the owls, and they also managed to identify more features. So for context sake, we had three owl species with pictures of three owl species, and would show them, and they would say, this is an owl, yes, this is an owl, and also that's an owl. But then in some cases, they would mix up, but still, they'll still get that it's an owl. And then we also played some of the calls for them. They would also identify that this is an owl, but that's probably another bird that's not an owl. So that's how we were kind of gauging the knowledge of the people. And then this was just how they responded to the number of calls specifically. So Northerners also managed to recognize more calls as compared to Southerners, with most people, like from the 269 people that recognized three calls, 96% of those were from the northern region. And in terms of the frequency of encounter, there was also a significant difference there, with a majority of the people also reporting that they see like owls on a monthly basis or on a quarterly basis. And then, but these similarities were kind of the same between the northern region and the southern region. So we could kind of make a distant guess that there's still owls in both of these regions, and they encountered relatively similar rates in both the regions. And then we also asked people that also cognizantly were aware of the fact that they were trading, and they let us know on that information. And they also managed to identify a couple of species. So the reason why we had to kind of narrow down our sample size to the people who have actually participated in trade was for us to kind of understand that what's the nature and what are the drivers for these people to be trading in them. And from our results, we realize that these people have an increased amount of knowledge, and as such, it could be due to the fact that there's a generational trait that's kept in families, and it's done and it goes down the lineage. So a lot of knowledge has been passed through the families like that. And then at the markets, we also asked the respondents if they'd seen any of the owl specimens at the markets. And then majority of our respondents reported having seen the barn owl at the markets, and of which majority of them were in the north. And then also the northern white-faced owl was also reported to be seen at most of the medicine markets in the north. So this difference was particularly due to the fact that the kind of cultural setup in the north and in the south is different. So from the medicine markets that we visited, the setup in the north was that they would kind of just take all the specimens and then they lay them out on the ground. Whilst in the south, it was more of like a covert practice where you had to get into a store and then go back before you can be told of the information on the availability of owls. So yeah, we did see more owls at the northern markets than the south. So this is just an illustration of some of the body parts that we found. So that's so a couple of heads and feet there as well. And then these are four carcasses for northern white-faced owl. And if you look closer, you can see there's also other bird species there, and also other normal species present at the market. So this is the typical setup in the northern markets. Whereas in the southern markets, it will just be a store and everything else is eaten at the back and is produced kind of more on demand. So in terms of the uses that we got for these body parts in the northern region, uh, most of the uses we got were that these body parts are used to cure physical ailments. So there's particularly one village in in Hadija where the people there they're like a lot of fishermen. So they say that it helps them to cure the colds that they get. Apparently, they feel the cold more because of the fishing that they do and burning these body parts and mixing them with some other local herbs helps them to combat that in particular. But they also mentioned other ailments like ulcers and headaches and things like that. And then there's also reported uses as love potion. For this particular part, the young men would take the ash from the bones, they burn the bones and they take the ash and then just apply it underneath their eyes. And then in a different village, still in Algeria, this was a bit unique, which is why I put it there. They also reported that um, using these our body parts helps them to locate profiles and they then put up their bones there. And then in terms of prices, one owl leg or claw would cost about 200 naira, and then the head was around 500, and then the full carcass was the most expensive, being up to 3,000 Nigerian naira. And then the reasons we got for the owl body part trade in southern Nigeria, so we got reasons like to win the lottery, and also to disappear, like when there's a conflict happening, you can just look away. So in as much as the owl can turn its head all the way to the back, if you just look to the side, you can disappear from the dangerous situation that should be in, and then your life is then preserved in that manner and then also still kind of linked to winning the lottery. So a lot of reasons in the South were kind of linked to um, personal personal benefits, whilst those in the North were more towards the um, usage as herbs and for like improvement of health and also just ecosystem protection. So from our survey also when we're looking at the demographics, in terms of the people that have actually been involved in the trade. So there's a question, and we could also deduce from the questionnaire during the survey that no, this one has actually gone to the market because responses like, yes, I went to buy this last weekend. I used it to cure my headache or something like that. So we also had like 39 of our respondents confirmed to have actively been involved in the trade of those oil body parts within the last 2 years of this survey. And from those respondents, we saw that age is not a significant predictor of all body part trade tendencies. So it's not something that we can say that young people are more likely to do it or older people are more likely to do it, given the reasons that we saw in the previous slides. In the South, everyone is keen to be economically successful, and in the North, everyone is also keen to be healthy. So everyone is equally participating in the trade. So in terms of the future and the protection of the species, there shouldn't be like an exclusion of certain age groups when there's things like education awareness campaigns being done, and things like that. And then in terms of gender, there was also a significant difference between the tendencies of the two genders to trade in body parts. And we noticed that males were predominantly the ones most involved in this trade. This result was also partially affected by the fact that we didn't manage to speak to majority of females in the north, but even if that's the case, typically the females in the north are not delegated such duties in any case. So yeah, those are the ones that are responsible for the economic security of the families, um, and also they're the ones that actually go out to hunt, especially in the north. So when they go out to hunt and they see these birds, they then take opportunistic opportunities to hunt these birds and use the body parts for the reasons previously stated. And then in terms of income, there wasn't a significant difference. So we also concluded that income is not a significant predictor of all body part trading tendencies. So the conclusion is that in the South, typically, as we know that the more one gets rich, the more they still want to get richer. So that even if one is in the highest income bracket, they're still likely to engage in such trade. And in the north as well, given that there's a farming communities and fishing, they're also still likely to engage in this trade to enhance their physical wellness so that they can survive. And then in terms of occupation as well, there's a significant difference in the different occupations that we got and their tendencies to be involved in trade. And we notice that farmers are the most likely to partake in all body part trade. In the north, this particularly being for the reason that they're the most exposed to these birds, and as such they've got more opportunities to actually hunt them down and the use the use the parts for different reasons. And then in the south as well, it was farmers that have particularly been affected by the climate crisis, and so the unpredictability of rainfall patterns. People end up using these body parts to kind of have other sources of income that they can promote through superstitious means. So yeah, farmers have felt that pain more than everyone. And then in terms of education, we realize that education is not a significant predictor of all body part trait tendencies as well. So this still ties to the other fact that I mentioned, that for future conservation initiatives, there shouldn't be an exclusion. See that people in tertiary institutions are probably aware of the ecological importance of ours. So let's just focus on the younger age groups or the younger people or the primary schools rather. but we should have like targeted approaches for tertiary schools, secondary school, primary schools, because these are all people that have the same um, tendency to be engaged in these exercises. So from this study, these are the recommendations that we came up with. Since the study was rapid and quantitative, there's a need to build up on those findings and the need for a qualitative study targeting the traditional healers and hunters and further potential customers. So more in-depth discussions with these particular um, employment groups to also kind of raise awareness during that process as well, and also just to complement this kind of baseline that was done and effectively kind of monitor the population and the change therefore of the species in the northern and in the southern region as well. So there's also a need to create a platform to ensure constant engagement with stakeholders such as local communities, traditional leaders, and cultural practitioners, because this is a bit of a sensitive issue. You wouldn't just expect to walk up to someone you've just met today and you ask them those kind of questions and they're kind of open with you. So like a continuous platform for continuous engagements helps to build trust and also can help us to get more honest answers from these people due to the relationship that will now be existing. And then there's also need for sustainable livelihood alternatives, as this could ease the pressure of the belief-based use of ours, particularly in the South, where the reasons were more for economic success, and to address the usage of ours in the North. There's also a need to kind of diversify the health alternatives available there. And then there's also more ecological research needed, especially on the owls, given that this research was more social in nature. We actually need to know the technical nitty-gritties of how the owls are actually doing in the field. So owls being nocturnal species, there's like a very little ecological research that's done on them because they're not that easy to see. So yeah, there's really a need for a complementary ecological study on that so that we can kind of pick up any changes in populations and patterns um, as soon as they happen. So yeah, I would like to thank Aprori for the opportunity, actually for the great year that I had today, and also the University of Jos and the Raptor Research Foundation for supporting this research. And thank you all for listening. That's the end of my presentation.